Robert J. Cook of 270 Cerromar Way Square, Cerromar, Cerromar, in Venice, Florida, 34293. The phone number is 813-493-2755. Bob also maintains a residence at 2936 Liberty Point Drive, Sheboygan, Michigan, 49721. The phone is 616-627-2535. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw and Helen Earley at the Oldsmobile History Center at 4000 North Grand River in Lansing on November 15th, 1990. This is tape number 1 of 2 tapes. Bob, if you would just start with who you are, please, and when you started and what you were doing when you started at the plant.
Well, I'm Robert Cook, obviously,
Okay.
and started working for General Motors and for Oldsmobile in 1940 as a GMI student.
Okay.
Grew up in Lansing and applied at Oldsmobile for entrance to GMI, and later accepted in the 1940 class, so away we went. At that time, GMI, if you lived in Lansing or Flint or close by, you worked 4 weeks, went to school 4 weeks. So you got both plant experience and, of course, engineering training, engineering education, as you would at any engineering school.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated in 1944. And this was a little less than a 4-year stint, because once World War II started, or World War II had already really started for there, but once U.S. involvement in it, why our schedule went to a 6-day school schedule.
Oh.
And accelerated, they called it, and we were graduated about 6 months less than 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And guess why? Because, of course, they needed us in military. So in 44, after we graduated, why, I get a call that deferments for engineering training were all done, and you probably were going to be inducted. So rather quickly signed up for the Navy, volunteered, quote, for the Navy, and enjoyed that. Got back in 46 and returned to Oldsmobile on the assembly line.
Okay.
Most of my school experience, by the way, and work experience was in plant engineering, maintenance for a couple of years, then plant layout for a while, and finally in production engineering machining.
Okay.
With like John Howe and Dave King and people like that. So in 46, returned to the assembly plant in Building 16. The assembly plant in those days was still in Building 16, in the inspection department, working on mechanical follow-up, mechanical coordination, special problem solving, and those type of items. In 51 or 2, of course, well, let me just say that when the new assembly plant was, quote, new in those days, was done, Building 32, Building 75, I eventually went over there as superintendent of inspection. And by 1953, appointed chief inspector on all of Oldsmobile, succeeding Bob Rollis, and that included our our contacts with the 3 or 4 quote BOP assembly plants that built Oldsmobiles. So we had people that traveled that circuit. I had previously done some of that. And we not only had to, work on our cars in Lansing and the engines and all the parts, but also keep an eye on the quality of Oldsmobiles at the various assembly plants. 55, they switched me over to manufacturing as general superintendent. I relieved a man named Jim Hughes, who retired.
Okay.
And that included the engine plant, press metal plant, paint plant, and final assembly plants.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So those all were under me then. And by 1958, another change to what they call production manager, in charge of material procurement, material handling, material scheduling, and including in those days the service parts warehouse.
Okay.
So,
was that a new assignment? A new kind of job?
No, well, a little bit. Maybe because of the...
It combined some things that...
No, those were all pretty
were all
much under my
previously
successor, except maybe the parts department was added to it. I can't remember. But Floyd Burr, who I succeeded there, no, he had about the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I was on that assignment for quite a while, and the whole things changed as I stayed in the material end of the business. Eventually, purchasing was put under that same staff head, and traffic came under it, and I think that was mostly it.
Okay.
And then, of course, in '72, appointed general manufacturing manager when Bob Rollis retired, and January '74, general manager of Oldsmobile and vice president of General Motors. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of...
When did you retire, Bob?
Retired end of March '83.
86.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Yep.
Bob, back when you were over in the old car, the old car assembly plant, building 16.
The car. Oh, okay, I got
Building
it. Yeah.
16.
Yeah.
The old one.
Yeah.
You remember how fast that could go over there?
Well,
Right.
as I recall, when I went in there, they were running 2 shifts. I think they were running 2 shifts at 30.
30 an hour.
I think that was what we were running.
Okay.
And then later on, they went to work on it and tried to get up. We decided to one shift it at, I believe we tried to run 60. Now, I'm not sure whether we ever made it or not.
Now, what happened when we moved into, quote, the new assembly plant,
Well,
3275?
Well, that was a higher capacity output. And we went in there. When we built this one, Fisher had done some expanding, by the way,
Okay.
not to match us. So as I recall in there, we started out at 60, and 55 or 60 in there, and then went to, and then we decided to shove it up a bit at our place. Fisher didn't have the capacity, so we ran, for a while we ran 90 on one shift, and they ran 2 shifts at 45.
Oh, yeah.
Then later on, we got it up to 110 on one shift at our place, and Fisher 2 shifts at half that rate, 55. And we would store bodies all night and eat them up all day, while they kept running. So
Did
had that running at 110.
Did that create any unique situations with that arrangement?
No, except that it awed everybody to come in to see a line running 110. But it really is a good way to run an assembly plant. You man for the job. It's not that you just turn it up. You man for it, and yet it's quite efficient. And we had it all on days, so it worked out well. Worked out well, and
we must have been, if not the highest, close to the highest run rate.
I think so, but I don't know that. Yeah, but again, Fisher had to run 2 shifts, R1, and then later on, as things, I guess, maybe got a little more complex, and things like air conditioning were added to cars and all that. So there's more work. I think we balanced out with Fisher. Got rid of some of the problems of floating bodies, by the way. That was a little bit costly. Yeah.
Was 120 the highest rate we ever achieved?
110, as far as I know.
110.
110, as far as I know. Yeah. Because Tom Downey used to come over with a big grin, And I can't remember how long we ran that, but somebody like Bill Slack would remember probably.
Now, you saw another new assembly plant somewhere along the line.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we built the new one on Olds Avenue there, and somewhere in the mid to late 70s.
Yeah, right.
And I can't remember the exact date because we built it once and stopped it when the oil crunch hit, and some kind of a slowdown came with the car sales, and then when the outlook improved, I went in and finished it. And of course, we have 2 assembly lines, both at 60 an hour, 2 shifts. So.
Right. Okay. The during all that time, Bob, as you saw managers change and those kinds of things, how would you characterize the management approach in the plant? Had it changed much over that continuum of time that you saw?
Oh, I suppose it changed, but I probably grew with it and maybe didn't recognize some of the changes that go on when you're right there and going with it. You probably just grow with it and don't recognize them.
Yeah.
But you had to, you learn to manage with the union, with their help, or sometimes with their opposition. But you had to learn to handle them and manage with them, and they with us, I suppose.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I can I can remember my grandfather. Of course, he retired in '41. I just barely a student, but I can remember before I even come in that the foreman did his own hiring. This was common practice. Foreman hired. If you came in and wanted to go to work, you got a hold of the foreman down there where you're going to work, and he'd either tell you, sure, report next Monday, or no, I don't have an opening, and so forth. So I can remember going over one night to the house, and he was all upset and sputtering. He was telling Grandma, he said, I don't know how I'm ever going to keep this working there. He was getting ready to retire, I think, anyhow. He said, you know what they did today? He said, they tell me that I can't hire anymore. Personnel department's going to hire the people and send them to me. Can you imagine that? The personnel department's going to take over hiring. He said, I can't even hire. Some of these guys he'd been hiring the last couple of years, couldn't hire them anymore. He had to go see personnel. Yeah, and of course they didn't have very great seniority records in those days, so they finally had to get seniority records posted. Some of them they had to go from memory. Let's see, when did you come in? Oh, were you 1933, 35? Well, anyhow, they put a date down. I think some of them stretched it a bit. Because I had one guy who gave a 45-year ring when he was 61 years old.
That's interesting.
One time. I said, you were a bit young. He said, that's right, though. He said, I did hire him at 16. He may have.
Yeah.
He said, they hired me nights. This was back before 1940.
Yeah.
They hired me nights. I was going to school downtown, Central, high school. I was driving cars at night, loading boxcars.
Oh, yeah.
He said I was 16. I don't know whether he was or not, but anyhow, that's what the record shows.
Yeah, sure. That's neat.
That's what his retirement showed, by the way, too.
Did you go out in the plant after you became general manager? Would you, without, just go out and walk around the plant or see what was happening?
Oh, you go out and plant some, but you don't get the time in the plant I used to get. I used to live out there. Oh, no, you don't have that time. You have sales, you have engineering, you have coordination with Detroit, you have lots of other activities you have to do. So sometimes people say, well, you don't get out in the plant very often. I heard that from a couple of my old buddies. Well, it's because I had some other things to do, and like I told a couple of them, you're running the plant pretty good. If you weren't, I'd be here more often. So don't feel too bad about it. If you see me too often, you might get suspicious,
Making a number of trips to Detroit, too.
Oh, yeah. And we had dealer meetings every year, You always had those. That had to help on those, or thought I did. I think it was good that we did. And lots of time in Detroit coordinating. You have to. Yeah.
That was a big part of the general manager's job.
Well,
Detroit sort of things.
Oh, yeah, sure. For sure. You got your bosses, you got committees, you got styling. A lot of, you got to spend some time down there with your people, because while they do the styling, you have to approve it and finally get there and negotiate it or change it or try to get what you want to your identity in the cars.
Could you as a general manager affect the styling fairly significantly?
Oh, sure.
pretty much
Oh,
create.
sure. We couldn't just take off and do it completely different than everybody else. You know, there wasn't that much money, but you could affect a lot of things that affected identity of your car, and yeah, and the looks of your car.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I don't know whether you want to go back and talk about things in the plant as you go by history, by years, or what you want to do, Jim.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we bounce around. It doesn't hurt anything. So.
I just got some notes I made going back by years, if you want to.
Okay, well, let's rattle through those and see what you came up with.
Okay. You were talking about the, quote, old assembly line building 16. We might go back to that a little bit. Well, maybe, yeah, right after the war, you know, besides the line, there's people. A fellow named Mike Minnow was running the thing. You know, he's the old-time superintendent. And a lot of the fellows that had run it before World War II, they kind of got back on the assembly line. And as far as people, when I first got back, John Dykstra was still there, by the way.
Okay.
John was general manufacturing manager.
All right.
And they had brought Tom Downey in as his assistant.
Okay.
And I think eventual, you know, lineup replacement. So John was still there, and of course, before I'd gone in the Navy, while I was still a student, I'd had some opportunity to contact John and on war work. We were in, you know, a lot of experience in war work, and he would be out on his weekly meetings in these various projects. So John was still there, but about you know, after that, why Tom Downey took over, and then when you talk about the 40s, if you want to talk about the rest of that, why, I think it was about, what year did we convert to the building 3275? Was that 49 or 50?
49 or 50.
Yeah, that's what I got right in there. More modern assembly line, of course, with the increased capacity. And
See, Bob, excuse the interruption. Were you there in the 47, 46 strike, whatever that were you back
I was,
by
no,
then?
no, the strike was early in 46.
Yeah, so you
Late
hadn't got
45.
back yet.
See, the war ended in August, say 1st September 45, and the strike, I think, was like
Started in
November, December, yeah. No, I
Ran
wasn't
through
back yet.
March.
No, I didn't get back
You
until,
hadn't got back yet.
I didn't get back until sometime like midsummer of 46.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But one thing, if you're going to talk about in the 40s at Olds, you know, you got to talk about rocket engine.
all right.
Yeah, and that thing, as I recall, we used it on our 49 models first, I believe I'm right.
Right.
But in 48, we were setting up that whole engine plant, you know, buying tooling, trying out machinery, had a big pilot program, built a lot of engines.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Filled the whole second floor at 32, I think,
Oh.
and
all
maybe
right.
some more. And had engines seemed like all over, you know, just building them and getting experience. And of course it was, well, I wasn't in the engine plant right then. Eventually I got to spend some time over there after I got another assignment, but the, you know, the machinery that went in there was just the very latest stuff that people had nowhere had seen before. Big transfer machines and
Previous to that, it was all kind of single purpose stuff?
well, more that way. You know, the old 6 and 8, the machinery had been around a long time, so there. But this was a chance for all new machinery and all new techniques, so it was really done pretty modern. And well, fellows like I think, well, one of the fellows that was right up front in tooling that was Marv Katke, who later went to Ford, you know, and retired as a Ford vice president.
Yeah.
And of course, John Dykstra finally went down and retired as president of Ford. But Marv was direct on there, and then fellows, you know, John Howell, Pete Mitchell, those fellows were down there a lot too on that job. So it was a good-sized job. They talked to me one time about going on it, and I was still out in the assembly plant, and you know, I opted to stay in the assembly plant and get some more experience there because I hadn't been there long enough. I didn't think, and I'd worked production engineering before I went in the Navy, so I didn't go down on the tooling phase of it, but
Had you kind of wanted to direct your career towards the supervisory side of the house, or?
no, not necessarily, but it just, you know, I'd had time in plant layout, I'd had time in maintenance, I'd had, while I was a student, I had the last year and a half I was in school, I was in production engineering all the time, and that was a great place during the war to be working because you had new projects coming all the time. So I just wanted to get over on the assembly, paint, sheet metal, that kind of side of the stuff, and see that where cars were built, not necessarily just cast iron, but the whole car. So that's why I kind of opted to stay on assembly. But you can't forget the V8 if you're going to go into the 40, and
How did they test those engines?
test them under their own power, as far as I
Well,
know.
what I mean is, would they put them in a
Put them on a
older
test stand.
model car and run them on the roads?
No.
Or you tested
Production
them on
tested
stands?
on stands.
On stands.
Oh yeah, and an engine play, you test them on it. No, somebody took some engines out in cars, obviously. Engineering probably mostly would take them to put them in cars and on a sampling basis and run them, and I'm sure of that. But our volume tests were on test stands. Run with gasoline. Later on, we went to using natural gas as a power, as a fuel. But test them under their own power, run them. Oh yeah, that was a kind of a select job. If you were a tester, you had to understand engines and be able to hear little things on them. And, oh yeah. So, but everything got tested, all engines, once they come off on their own power, and.
Okay.
So I don't know. You want me to ramble on?
Sure.
Okay. 1950s, and what went on during the 50s? Those things I remember was here early in the 50s. Why we end up in another war. The U.S. does in Korea. So during World War II, earlier I'll backtrack one time. That one we were making largely guns and shells. We made 20 millimeters, we made 37s, we made 75s, I think 105s. Then we made oodles of shells, and not only in Lansing, a couple of operations there, but we had a plant in Kansas City and a plant in Janesville all making shells. But here that war is over now, and we go into the 50s, and we're in another war in Korea. So it was time to throttle car production. They didn't shut it off, they just throttled it. And said that, time to get in war work again. So it's this time a little different. We ran jet engine rotors. Jet engines had come on, and we took on, along with Buick, what they call a J65 jet engine. It was a fighter engine, and probably one of the first ones. The engine, when it was all done, was shipped to BOP Kansas City and put in an airplane that GM was making down there. And but we made the complete rotor assembly, and that's what we built Plant 3 for. Plant 3 was built to make that. Yep. Okay. Built very rapidly, I might add, too.
Was it?
With high priority build. Yep, because I remember being over there trying out some machinery and tooling and some gauging. I was in inspection then, along with Charlie Armitage, and I did the gauging on that job, on the jet. And we were over there trying out gauges and tooling and working with some setup guys when the roof wasn't all on the building.
Really?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. We had to make sure we worked in an area where it had roofs, because down 3 bays the roof was going on there. Oh, yeah. While they were building the building, we were setting machinery. You had priority in the war, obviously, and you should have, because you needed it. So you got priority on everything you needed, including Saturdays and Sundays. Your priority was in the plant. About 6 months straight of 7 days a week.
It was.
Very
heavy effort.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I don't think I missed a Sunday for 6 months for a while. But that's what it took, But then what else did we build? Well, you made jets. That was different. We did get back into some guns, because we'd made them before and still had people that knew how to make them. And they went down and got some of the tooling back from the arsenal where it was stored and went back to the guns. And then instead of shells, we were going to 3.5-inch bazooka rockets, which we didn't have in World War II, but they were now coming on. These were the anti-tank things, So we had a big operation in that. But anyhow, the war got over, and then they let us go back, on car production again. But what I remember on cars, like 53, 54, two-toning came in, and metallic paints came in, and we started getting curved glass windshields and things like that.
Those almost have presented unique problems.
Oh, yeah, they were different, sure. But then you had to have something. I remember 55 as being a very big year volume-wise, because things kind of, I think that was maybe at that time our biggest year, 700,000 or something, but, you know,
500 and some, I think.
500, was it 570? Yeah,
Volume.
it was bigger than we'd ever done, I think. And then, of course,
How did we do that?
what do you mean, how do you do it?
I mean, how did the
You work
plant
a lot
must
of
have been-
overtime.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, how we achieved that.
Oodles of overtime. Yeah, lots of
Basically
Saturdays.
overtime.
Oh, yeah, lots of Saturdays and a fair number of Sundays on parts making. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because they must have been limited on our machining capacity and our assembly capacity.
Yeah, but
so
you
to
worked
speak.
to very heavy overtime.
Mm.
That's where you made it. Mm-hmm. I guess I couldn't tell you any other way. Because you couldn't tool anymore in a short notice. Yeah. But, what else came along? Seems to me like we were starting to put out some performance models. What was it?
We had the J2.
J2. Was that the 3.2 barrel?
3.2.
3.2s, oh yeah, I remember that. You go along, it's supposed to go along and perform kind of save gas and then put her at the floor and
Yeah.
she'd cut in 2 more carburetors. Oh yeah. That didn't last too long, by the way.
No.
A couple of years we were out of that one.
What happened there? I guess people didn't buy it apparently.
Had to keep it tuned up very. It ran fine if you kept it tuned up, but somehow it didn't stay adjusted as well as they want.
The
So
linkages.
if you got everything tuned up, it ran fine, but you better keep doing it rather frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I remember 58, which was a recession year, really slow.
Yeah.
And first year, I believe, that Olds ever came in third, though. It was 58
Yeah. I think that's right.
with the Chrome King.
Yeah.
You
That
know,
was a
you,
monster,
You know what the
wasn't it?
Chrome King was? You got pictures of it, huh?
Chrome monster.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it loaded with it. People bought it.
Yeah.
People bought it different. And
Mr. Cook, do you remember when the factory first began thinking about what was then called the intermediate car, that later was the F-85? How early in the late 50s was that talked about? Or
I don't know. When I
planned for?
talked, they started building it. It's, what, 62, wasn't it?
61.
61.
61 model first? Okay.
Yeah, but I was just wondering how many years had the
Oh, I don't-
factory thought about it when the
Oh, I don't know.
intermediates were coming in from foreign areas?
I don't know. You know, the planning on models was done by engineering and sales, really. The plant, the factory didn't do much except respond. They say, we got this coming, or we're going to get this, and where are you going to build it, or how are you going to build it?
Yeah. Well, did you fellas out there in the shop get involved in any of those kinds of discussions up front at all, or were you kind of the tail end of the dog, so to speak?
Oh,
It
I
just
don't
arrived?
know that I didn't feel we were the tail end of the dog, but we'd get into it whenever the appropriate time was.
Okay, so,
We'd get it we didn't get in on it way out in front.
No.
When they were
but you just
noodling
didn't
it here.
see it when it arrived as the first pilot job either.
Oh, you couldn't. You had to have a place to build it and equipment to build it with.
Yeah.
So by the time we had F-85, sure. We'd have had to have a couple of years because we put a separate, we retooled the old assembly line. That's what we did.
Old Milling
Yeah,
16 did it,
yeah. And we run it one shift, I think, the first year. 25 an hour, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
20 an
I
hour.
think it was 20.
Yeah, someone there,
Yeah.
and do it. So we had to tool it, you know. So you had to have a year or two. But
We built a big new warehouse in there too somewhere. Plant 4.
oh yeah,
You remember that?
yeah, I had the warehouse when we built that, and that was in
59, I think.
sometime after 58. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, 59 or 60,
Yeah.
61 in there. Yeah, because Ken Ricks was running that when we moved out there. And I'm trying to think why. Oh, I know. We wanted to enlarge and to get some more room over in Building 62 for, I think, maintenance went over there heavily. And then some personnel officers third. But I think the original group went in there was mostly the plant engineering departments went in there.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we had room for them. Got them out of some of the buildings out toward the engine plant stuff that they wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we built the warehouse out there. That was a...
Well, in
And-
62, we had the turbocharged engine too.
When?
A fluid-injected turbocharged engine.
What year?
On the Jetfire in 1962. We only built that for 62 and 63.
Oh, could be. I guess I've kind of forgotten that one.
Well, it was a fluid-injected
Oh.
turbocharged.
Uh-huh. Well, I was still running 50s here, and of course 59 was the year of the tail fins.
Yes.
Oh yeah, and ours weren't as severe as a few others, but everybody had tail fins in that time, and then by 60 they were starting to taper them back again. But you know, if I look at the 50s and who was around, Wolfram was general manager, I think almost all the 50s, because Mr. Skinner had left maybe in 51, somewhere in there, I believe. Downey was most of the time manufacturing, well, all of that was manufacturing manager. Harold Metzel, chief engineer, because he had relieved Mr. Wolfram there, and of course one of his most famous assistants was Pete Estes. Pete was in engineering and one of Metzel's assistants. We had Don Burnham around in manufacturing yet. He was he was what they called I don't know, manufacturing manager. I guess he reported to Downey, I believe. And then I don't know what Phil Monahan. I think they'd moved Phil Monahan out into sales by then. By the time there, and then reliability. Gee, we had a lot of them there. Rollis was in there. I was in there. Elmer Cole. Had, you know, it seemed like that got some turnover.
See, at that point in
50s.
time, all of the inspection group was part of manufacturing.
I reported to Downey. I reported to Downey.
Yeah.
Later on, this was after Skinner moved down to the corporation. And they got some different. Then they kind of started taking reliability out from under manufacturing, calling it reliability, by the way, instead of inspection, and moving it out of manufacturing onto really a separate staff.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had people there, you know, Mahoney personnel, Earl Schoen was there, still comptroller, and Elliott hadn't arrived, so that's kind of where I had the 50s, anyhow.
Okay.
Just kind of what you wanted.
Oh, doing fine. Excellent job. Yeah.
In the 60s, well, what I kind of remember there a little bit, we continued, of course, the 88s and 98s, which had been Oldsmobile standbys over the lot of years. But it was time to start expanding the line and introducing new ones like the F-85, and I did have 61 down here, yeah. And later named a Cutlass, and then in, I think 60, 61, two Starfires, which was really a modification of the 88s. And that, of course, had the big wide chrome strips down the side and a little more, you know, fairly heavy chrome and medium high performance engines in it. And I think we'd opened up the exhaust system a little bit, so you got a bit of roar on it. And they were quite popular. And the ride, I think the ride was firm just a little bit on them for handling. So we got that. And then, of course, in 66 came the Tornado. And that was a completely new, and I don't think they'd been a front drive car since what, the Cord or the something like that. And so this was a completely new car all the way and a new development. A lot of good publicity, a development by Oldsmobile, and it really turned out to be as far as I can remember, a really quite trouble-free car. It was for a brand new development, and as radical a change it was, it came through in rather great color. One model, a two-door, and a rather good size car, but a different one. And I'll tell you a little later, it was a front drive, a little different. It was a 4.5 engine front drive, as opposed to the new cars now that are a transverse engine front drive. But anyhow, it was time at Oldsmobile to be adding new models and expanding the line. That's kind of what happened in the 60s. Tried to get a bigger share of the market, I believe.
See, while we were doing that, Bob, we moved all those little F-85s over onto the other assembly line.
Well, we did in about 66.
64, maybe.
Was it 64?
Yeah, I think so. 64.
Yeah, we integrated those. The name got changed to Cutlass, sometime in there.
Yeah.
And the that's right, we did. We moved that or integrated it with the 88s and 98s, didn't we?
Yeah.
As I recall, Fisher had one line on Cutlass and one line on 88s and 98s, I think. And then we put them all down one line. Yeah.
But was that a fun time too?
Well, it was, you know, a little more complexity, but boy, you had lots of flexibility too.
Yeah.
You could respond to market, you know, quite readily. And so I, you know, other than maybe a little more complexity of three lines, but that's what the market required, so no problem. People in the 60s, you know, started out with Wolfram general manager, and he retired about 64, I believe. And then Metzel came in. Am I getting right? Metzel was around through 69, and then John Belts came in 69, if I'm right. Yeah. And of course, Rollis was in manufacturing, and engineering had, well, John was chief engineer before Belts, before he became general manager. And Howard Carroll came on scene as chief engineer, I believe. Yeah. So that's kind of what I remember. 60s. 70s, well, I saw the Cutlass keep coming on. The Cutlass Capri keep coming on up in popularity. Saw Olds take over number 3 in sales spot. And we really dominated the number 3 position for, starting about 72, I think. And it just kept coming. We got our first 1 million car sales year in 77.
How did that all happen? How did we do that?
I
mean, what did it take for us to capture the number 3 and the number...
It took adding these other lines that I talked, you know, that we're adding during the 60s and developing them. And, you know, I mentioned like the Cutlass, but there was others, like in the 98 line. They come out with the Regency and the Regency Brougham, and you know, a couple of models there that, besides the basic 98, that gave us a good appeal. And
we were covering a big
so we were spreading out on the market. Yeah, that's what we had to do to get there. Yeah, not just 88s and 98s, but a lot of cars and other versions. We had performance versions of some of these cars. Hearst Oldsmobiles came in, 442, 442s. You know, not. They weren't big, but they took a segment of the market and helped Cutlass. And of course, Cutlass came on like a tiger. It kept coming and coming, and that was helping us. Yeah. But then, of course, the 70s also. We added the Sierras and the Calais sometime in the 70s. That was later 70s, I guess, in there. And of course, we had the first big fuel crunch in 73. Right. In the fall when. All of a sudden, you couldn't sell anything that didn't get a great big increase in mileage, and so
that must have caused some unique problems for us because of our bigger automobiles that we generally had.
It did everybody that made bigger automobiles. A lot of us made bigger automobiles. Yeah. So.
Was there a lot of scrambling at that juncture, Bob, to try and do something quick?
Oh yeah, and I just mentioned that the immediate effect was, of course, car sales slowed up, and we had to start shutting plants down for weeks at a time, and then we'd build a while and shut down a while, but we really had to start making some moves as rapidly as we could, you know, to offset this increased or scarcity of fuel and increased price. So we had, first thing you do is make some rapid engine changes. Try to get, what can you do there? Obviously, if you get a little smaller engines and a little less performance in the cars, well, you can up the mileage. And it was mileage that people wanted to sell because of gas. So, and eventually we discontinued the 455, the biggest V8 we made, and increased the usage of 350s. Developed a 260, which was basically still a V8, but basically a down boring is what it really was. And eventually dropped to 350 and got to 307 in there. And of course eventually tooled the diesel V8.
Were those all kind of outgrowths from that crunch?
The trend for two things, the fuel shortage and of course the law requirement for the fleet mileage that you had to do by law as you came up to the 26.5 or 27.5 miles a gallon thing on a graduated scale. Why you had to make progress on it, and those are the things you had to do. But and the other thing you had to do on this during this period was of course, you took a look at what does it take to make lighter cars, because fuel, fuel economy, smaller engines, lighter cars, maybe smaller cars, why, this is the way you get fuel economy. So you still wanted cars that people wanted, you wanted cars that were well styled, you wanted cars that had as much room as you get in them for luggage and for people and comfort. So this started in a big push to front drive again.
Oh, okay.
And in this case, it was a GM elected to go, and properly so, on a transverse engine front drive, because this meant you could get as much stuff up under the hood, leave as much room in the back for the passenger and luggage as possible, and still get a smaller car. So there's a big swing to that. There was heavier swing to plastics usage, and trend away from chrome, which meant we didn't need a plating plant. We got rid of one of them in the main plant, and eventually, I guess, they're all gone now. But that trend started. More plastics were there. There was some work on aluminum, but it never kind of held on. And we made some aluminum hoods for a while, and then plastic hoods. And aluminum was just too hard to work, I think, for the handling and the type of work we had to do on it. And plastic turned out to be better, so we went heavily into plastics.
What about unleaded fuel? What changes in engines were necessitated by that? Use of unleaded fuel.
Oh, that was because of air quality, not fuel shortage.
But I mean, what
air quality is what made that.
But what changes would have to take place in an engine to accommodate itself to unleaded fuel?
Well,
and that must have been a consideration to an engine design.
Oh yeah, when that came through. But the biggest thing on unleaded fuel is you had to do some improvement in valves and valve seating. The engines that ran on the old, heavier leaded fuel, you could go with the softer valve seats, softer valves, and they'd wear in and wear good. And you put unleaded in, the durability wasn't good enough. So you had to go to hardened valves, hardened valve seats, valve seat inserts, things like that. And of course you had to go away from the engine, but in the exhaust system of the car you had to go to catalytic converter. And that's what required no lead, because catalytic converters and lead don't get along very well. They plug them up, so.
Hey, Bob, you mentioned the diesel was kind of a thing that happened there as an outgrowth of that. How did Olds get involved in the diesel thing?
Oh,
we were the only ones that...
Well, you were always, at those times, of course, most divisions had their own engine plant.
Yes.
Did their own developing. We had one, Buick, Chevrolet had theirs, Pontiac. So we were out looking for ways to make our cars and our engines, most effective with this mileage thing coming up. And in our analysis, a diesel was a good bet. Diesel had been growing in popularity in Europe, all over. Diesel fuel in Europe and in the U.S. was a lot less costly than gasoline.
Okay.
It may not be now,
No,
but it was those days. And it looked like maybe that was a trend of the future, and we could, so our guys went to work and found out they could dieselize our by using our V8 components, could dieselize it and beef it where it needed to be, and develop a diesel, which they did. And I might add, it very successful. We had a huge demand on them for a while, until the price of diesel fuel got out of sight again, and things changed. Diesel, other fuels didn't go up as much. They got more available and didn't go up on price, so economy again didn't become quite as much factor, and then diesel faded down. Diesel had a lot of advantages, had some disadvantages. I think in Europe, I don't know, they're still making as many in Europe or not. I don't see that information anymore, but boy, it used to be you'd go over and like in Amsterdam, you get in a taxi, it was diesel. Yeah. Everything in sight was diesel. Yeah. So it was a move to get our mileage and get in there. And gee, I forget, we sold a lot of those for a while, until this. It's just like right now, fuel prices are back up again right now. So again, I think you're going to find owners out looking for higher mileage cars.
Yeah, it's just very
on the roller coaster. Yeah.
the front drive things, the transverse front drive things that started to happen at that time. I think we got involved in the Omega, maybe it was the first
Yeah.
of the front drive programs. In those kinds of cases where we shared a basic car with other divisions, how did Olds, so to speak, decide that they wanted to get involved in that sort of a program? Which would have been done, of course, way up front, long.
I guess I don't understand your question.
Was the decision made to get involved with like the Omega front drive program? Was that created by the sales and general managers and the staffs at Oldsmobile thinking about the need in the future, or how did we decide, so to speak, to get involved with that kind of
Yeah,
program?
well, I think they just had the planning sessions, and most of the time between engineering and sales, they had planned what do we need to sell, what do we need to stay competitive, what
Okay.
do we need to spread the market, and then you coordinate it with the corporation programs. If most of the time you were, these programs are out, you kind of want to be involved in them because you want to be involved in the future products down the road. So
Sure.
I don't think anybody would have forced you to do anything, but
No.
most of the time you were after wanting to be in there and wanting to keep
Okay.
your product line up wide enough to get a share of the market, and also you want to be in on the latest technology that was coming down the line.
Okay.
Usually pretty good. Oldsmobile never was a division that wanted to lay back on technology, as you well know. I think over the years, starting with transmissions way back in the 40s or 30s, well, you just wanted to be out in front and try to develop, and you should.
Would you say there's a friendly or a fierce competition among the car divisions in styling and being first with a new innovation?
Oh, I don't know as I like your words.
Well, it's competitive.
I don't know anything fierce about it, but you're competitive, that's true.
But it's
Yeah, you try to outstyle the other fellow a little bit.
friendly, you would say.
Oh, sure. I never saw anything that wasn't
Okay.
friendly on it. But, sure, you try to get what you want for your division or what's been your division's pattern, and that your dealers can sell or your customers will buy. And so, sure, you try to get that.
Did Olds generally, Bob, try and shoot at a specific market segment that you can chat with us about a little
Well,
bit?
No, as I told you, as it went down, it looked like we were starting to broaden
out, yeah.
our market. So many years ago, Olds was big cars. There's Buick and Olds and your bigger cars.
Yeah.
And so forth. And as we went through the 60s, they started to broaden, and in the 70s we broadened some more. So we got a wider range. We're in more of the market, from up at the high end down to the, fairly low. Not quite down all the way to Chevrolet, but we got a model or two down touching
in
them
that range.
a little bit. So you got more spread. And I think the other GM divisions probably did the same, and it was working fine. GM was getting a bigger share of the market than ever.
So it was
market.
doing a good job.
Sure it was, and GM was getting, close to 50% of the market?
51%?
Yeah, for a while, and so that was kind of the approach you did by widening it, broadening it, and you didn't tell every guy that wanted a big car he had to get an Olds, or every guy that wanted a little car had to go to Chevrolet. You wanted Chevrolet, and their models kind of crept up the other way, as you know, into that, so that you could not exactly like ours, but they had some models up in our end, and that was kind of, I think, the way all of them did, was broaden them out for each division and more in total for General Motors.
And that overlap didn't create what I call any significant difficulties.
I don't think so. No, I
was
don't think it
actually
did any
very
overlap. I think so. Yeah, sure. Got more of the market for each division, and that's more in total. That's what you're in business for.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Who makes the decision to drop a line like the Omega, for instance?
Oh, nobody makes a decision all alone. I think it
Well,
would.
I mean, it's a
It would
combined
probably,
thinking of-
if that, as an example, was decided, probably would initiate at the division, and then would probably be.
It wouldn't be the corporation telling the division.
Oh, I don't know whether they did or not, but normally it would start at the division and be discussed with the corporation people and the planning people down there, or the vice president down there, whoever your groupie was.
Mm-hmm.
So, you get those things, even if you initiate them, you get them approved,
But a decision like that would have to come from the division itself.
Well, I think most of the time probably would start, yeah. Of course, if you got one that you aren't selling or doing a very good job on, it's kind of obvious you got to do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be obvious to you or to them or to everybody. You either got to make some changes and do something with it, or put something else in place of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there shouldn't be any great problem deciding it. Probably everybody looks at the same data, ought to reasonably come up with the same decision.
The 70s and the Cutlass, where we did such a fine job. I suspect the sales organization was really into that.
Cutlass Supreme, we sold 500,000 of them a couple of years,
Just remarkable.
Cutlass Supreme sold 500,000 of those things a couple of years.
Yeah.
70, what was that first million car year? 77. 77. 77.
Right.
And I think 77, 78, we sold 500,000 of those things.
Yeah, it was just remarkable.
Yeah,
what we
just
did.
all over with them. Couple we had again, the Cutlass line was a fairly broad line. We had a good-looking coupe. We had a couple years, we had sedans that weren't the greatest looking, but we finally got a good sedan. We had a good station wagon in there.
Mm-hmm.
We did some performance jobs in there. We had a price leader line in there, as well as a midline, which is Cutlass Supreme. Then we had an upper line. So you had a good variety in that Cutlass thing, and it helped.
Apparently the sales organization must have loved the heck out of it.
Well, customers have to love it first, You can only sell what customers will buy. So customers got to like it too.
Yeah.
But we had, we had good engine combinations. You could get a 6, you could get a small V8. We had a few we made with some pretty good-sized V8s in. I don't know if they ever put a 4. Yeah, I guess we put a 455 in it a couple times, didn't we? And and then a 400. And so you kind of responded. We had some people in engineering that were off when the need showed. They're pretty good at coming up with combinations. You got the basic lineup, but you got all these little ones you can add on for a certain little market or a certain amount of attention.
Yeah.
They all add up, They all add up. So we had some people that were pretty adaptable over in engineering. When sales would say this, or hey, somebody's got that, we'll get one too. Well, work out. So that all helped too. Yeah. But I think that's what helped the thing. And a lot of these weren't great big retooling jobs. They were stuff we could take what we had and put it in and use it, so you make it fit. Like taking that and putting a 455 in it. Well, you squeezed here and there a little bit, and you fit the thing in. And now you had a real hot one. A guy that wanted economy, well, you could sell him a fairly stripped down 6-cylinder if that's what he wanted. If he wanted a Cutlass with didn't sell a lot of them, but some, and had good price leaders. But customers have to buy them. Dealers can do pretty good, but customers really have to. Dealer can't peddle anything that a customer doesn't want.
Do you think the 1970 Rally 350 was ahead of its time? Now, see, that had those yellow bumpers and like the car. Now you see a number of cars on the roads with same color bumpers as the vehicle.
Yeah, like most of them.
Or was it the
You see very many yellow ones? What year was that, by the way?
97.
Was it 70? I remember it. Yeah, I
We
remember
only
the
Little
had
yellow
that
car.
1 year.
Yeah, I think John liked that one. John Belts liked that kind of thought that one. I remember making the thing. Oh, yeah.
Bob, can you contrast maybe general manager styles a little bit for us?
Oh, I don't know if I want to do that.
Okay.
Really. Everybody has a style of their own, obviously.
How about, how would you perceive over that long continuous time that happened, the I'll call participative management thing. How did that change over those years?
Well, it depends. I don't know where you want to start.
We'll go back to when you started it.
I first sat in on staff meetings probably in 1955 when I was chief inspector. Now that you're not a staff head, you don't report general manager, but reported the works manager, and he always wanted the works manager, who was down at that time, to bring along the chief inspector and his production manager, they called it, like Floyd Burr, the material guy, which I later was too. So I sat on those since '55 with, by that time Wolfram was the general manager, and I forget whether G.R. Jones was sales manager, I guess, and Metz was the chief engineer, and he'd bring along usually one of his assistants, Pete, or somebody like that. And as far as participating, I found out, they discussed a lot of things. I'd sit there and listen, or if I had anything to contribute, which some subjects I obviously wouldn't at that time, fine, discuss them. From where I stood, I thought the participation was great. And I would hear, what engineers were working on and what their concerns were, and so I got to hear all that stuff for a lot of years. For what did I say, 55? Yeah, for probably. Well, I started setting on it in 1953, because I relieved Bob Rollis in 53, I think it was, on that one. So, I had 20 years of sitting on staff meeting before I became general manager, and I guess I thought that at Oldsmobile I was, communications were really pretty good. We had everything right there at, in Lansing. We had our accounting, we had our engineering, we had our manufacturing and reliability. We could, we could communicate and get there and move over in the other guy's department. Well, that pretty easily. We weren't massive like Chevrolet, with some installations at the tech center and some in Flint and some down at somewhere else, and so we had everything right close, and I thought communications were fine.
Did Olds have a unique relationship, so to speak, in its organization, in that we were all kind of together here in Lansing, and did that show up when you talked to other folks from other divisions?
I don't know. We had any different than they had at Flint, for example.
No.
Buick had about the same thing. Pontiac had about the same thing. Cadillac had it. Chevrolet was big enough where they probably were spread over. But
you hear the stories about the Olds family as being a, quote, better organization, and did those things appear at all?
I hear that, but I don't know why it should have been necessarily true.
You didn't see that necessarily in the upper levels of the organizations.
Well, I don't know. We had a lot of people that kind of grew up and came up through, got trained there, knew each other well. Our size might have helped a little bit for a lot of years. Buick was rather large compared to us. They were kind of the number 2 seller in General Motors for a long time.
Sure.
And they had a rather large operation in Flint. I don't know if that would have anything to do with it or not. Well, I hear it. I just got used to it, I guess. I didn't know anything different. Didn't know any better.
Did GM seem to transfer executives and people around among divisions in the central office as much in the early days as they seem to now?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea what they did in the early days.
Because it seems like this is still
I don't know. You still have to. You still have to. You transfer people. When you look at here about a year or two ago, when you talk about transferring people. Where were we? We had Howard Carroll, vice chairman. We had an ex-Oldsmobile sales guy running Chevrolet, Bob Berger. We got an ex-Oldsmobile sales guy running Cadillac in Grettenberger. We got an ex-Olds sales guy running Oldsmobile. How many people came out of Olds? A lot of them did, see? So, and I don't know whether years ago there was less people came out of Olds or not. I don't know that. I don't know that.
Seems like more recently a goodly number of
Yeah,
Olds people have
yeah.
been
Well, you know,
transferred to higher positions.
I guess we
in other
got
divisions.
a couple of them running. Bob Eaton's running that overseas. He got a lot of publicity right now. You know that? And doing a pretty good job, I guess. I saw Bob this summer. Remember him?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't with us too long. Came
No.
in Chevrolet, but yeah. But Dorsch knew him well, and so I don't know whether there was. You know, I suppose it all depends whether you're expanding or contracting, and how many are retiring and so forth. GM as a whole, I think, has been noted for, you know, training their own, pretty much.
Mhm.
True.
For a while after World War II, Ford was raiding the business, you know. God, he was up trying to get people all over, everywhere. We had a fair number of guys that left then. You know, Dykstra left. Walt, there was a bunch of fellows went down. Marv Katkin went down. Some of them didn't last long. Some of them lasted pretty good. But I can't even remember all of them went down. We must have lost 8 or 10 out of Lansing down there. And he did it by, you know, offering good pay. But you either fit his organization, or a couple of years later, goodbye. And that's the way it was. Some of them were really out of a job after a couple of years. And some of them did really well. John kept, you know, right on going.
You sure did.
Oh, yeah.
See, Bob, maybe could you just describe for us, the general manager has to spend X amount of time on these kinds of things in general, and how much of that would be spent on sales and engineering and manufacturing? Can you contrast that a little bit for us? How you?
Well, I don't
see
think
your
you can
time?
say that there's any formula that, or that you do it. You spend more or less time wherever your problems are of the moment. You know.
All right.
If
So it's still a very problem-oriented situation.
Oh yeah, and but you do have to. You know, you can't spend all your time in just one department. You can't spend it all on sales or all engineering or all manufacturing. And so you've got to spread it. But you do have to spend, you know, mix it up. And if you got more problems right now on trying to get some new models out, well, maybe the next 4 or 5 months you're going to spend more time with styling, more time with selling your program you want, and getting that set. And, well, as far as sales, time you spent with sales, you know, I was very fortunate. I had excellent sales managers. They could handle it, run it. But there was a couple times a year when you kind of knew you were going to, if you could, spend some extra time with sales. Usually in August, of course, we had the new car announcement showings for the dealers. And we used to have about 6 of them around the country. You'd take the new models out, and this is the time when you'd tell the dealers, show them the cars, tell them the program for the coming year. Well, usually the general manager went to all those, and he was the speaker, the guy that ran the deal, so he told them about it. The sales manager also participated heavily, and got it, and you kind of met the dealers and kind of geared them up, you know, tried to keep them.
Recording with Robert J. Cook of 270 Cerromar, Cerromar Way, Square, Venice, Florida, 34293. His phone number there is 813-493-2755. He also has a residence in Sheboygan at 2936 Liberty Point Drive, Sheboygan, 49721. Phone number is area code 616-627-2535. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw and Helen Earley at the Oldsmobile History Center on November 15th, 1990. This is tape number 2 of 2 tapes.
and, you know, keep them that they're going to keep spending money for new dealerships or upgrade their dealership or keep up with the increasing sales volume, whatever it was. That was kind of what those were, as well as, you know, make sure they were up to date on the new models that were coming. The other time you'd have to usually schedule a little time with sales was in, February, March. You got the car showings around the country, like Detroit Auto Show and Chicago Auto Show. Those kind of took your weekends up a little. But the other thing we tried to do every year, Oldsmobile did anyhow, don't ask me the other guys, we tried to have what we call a series of roundtable meetings in the country.
Okay.
And usually tried to have one in every zone in February and March. And when there was 27 zones, that's a lot of them. So usually we'd split that. The sales manager would take half or a few more, and I'd take half or a few less usually. And we'd split up the zones. Sometimes if we had a particular zone we had a problem or wanted influence on or make a couple point, we'd both go to one. And so those would take, you know, some time with sales and away from the plant, away from the office. And then, you know, the rest of the year you'd have more time for styling, more time for engineering, more time for manufacturing or whatever.
Okay.
And then,
And you had a group of...
you know, then you had to spend some time on schedules. What's that?
You had a group of regular kinds of meetings for the corporation, I assume, that you had to go to?
I had certain ones, yeah. I had corporation operations meeting, which is once a month. And they'd usually have once a month on product review, product planning.
All right.
And, I'm trying to think of the regular ones that we had. There was lots of them that you weren't scheduled to regularly call for a special purpose. But but they weren't bad, you know.
Design and styling, how often would you be going down there?
That varied against what was going on too. That varied. But usually didn't stay away from styling more than a couple weeks. Tried to pick up maybe every week, even if I was in Detroit for another meeting. You know, maybe from there we'd head out styling for an hour and see how they're coming on something or check on their latest progress on next year after's plans or whatever. So that was a rather frequent stop out styling, yeah. Very frequent. And but usually could do it. Sometimes we go down and spend the day. We've had a lot of work, but a lot of times why get a meeting out of the way at noon and head out styling in the afternoon.
Did you drive your own car, or did somebody drive for you?
Oh, depending on what we're doing. Yeah, I had a driver most of the time.
You probably worked on your way down.
Oh yeah, take a load of paper. We didn't have car telephones either. I elected not to put one in. Well, they weren't so easy. You had to do a rather major installation those days. So I just elected not to do it. Couldn't wait for me for an hour or two. But depended. If Dorsch and I were going down, which a lot of the time I was going down with him, we got into the later planning and all the changes through there and the front drive and all that. There was a lot of work on styling coordination. Why he and if we were going down, we wouldn't take a driver. Not very often. One of us would drive, and sometimes kind of fun because we'd take one of his test cars, and that was our test. We'd drive it down through on the freeway, down through Detroit traffic, back home on the expressway, you know. Got a pretty good feel of the car, so not too infrequently we were driving test cars while we're also going to Detroit. So that was wasn't always did, but other times I was just going down meeting Leonard would drive me, or Leonard Wilkinson most of the time. And so you could work in the car.
Well, would you go out sometimes on the end of the line and just pull the car off and drive it home just to see what it
No, I didn't pull them off and drive them. Somebody get me one if they wanted, but reliability get one.
If somebody would get you one.
Oh yeah, occasionally.
Any prepping on
Oh,
it, just
yeah, I do that occasionally.
see what would happen.
But I also had people in reliability that did that regularly. When I ran reliability, I'd have a car home off the line every night with manufacturer most of the nights. You had to be careful you didn't run them too much mileage, you know, but I'd take them out after supper and test drive them or look at them. And I'm sure the reliability guys did that after I got away from that, but that's kind of what they do. And we used to encourage some of the manufacturing guys to do it too. the guy that ran the assembly plant, and try to get them to take one.
Bob, maybe you could contrast for us the quality, quantity discussions that have gone on over the years, the relationship between those two.
I'm not sure I know what discussions you're talking about.
Well,
But there's no reason you can't have quality and quantity at the same time.
that's what I was
None
wondering,
whatsoever.
If that philosophy, not philosophy, but feeling changed any over that continuum of time that you were there.
There's no reason you can't have good quantity and good quality at the same time. And if you're running the right kind of a department, you'll have both. You know, some of the poorest quantity ones I've ever seen were the poorest quality ones too.
It's an interesting
Yeah.
paradox.
Oh yeah. Well, part of that because somebody finally slowed them down, you know, and then they couldn't get the quality, and they had to start back and do it. And in the meantime, their quantity went.
Yeah.
So usually the good quality ones were and good quantity ones were the same guys.
We're the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, some plants, some locations had better performance than others, but no reason you can't have them. And somebody said, well, you raise the line rate. Look at what you're making those guys work harder. You man it. You man it. You know, you don't just push the button and turn it up. You man it. Same thing when you slow it down. You man it again. Take some off. But people on the outside sometimes, you know, don't see it or don't know that.
I know, that's why the
Yeah,
discussion
they
is
don't
out
know
there.
it. Yeah, they don't know that.
Yeah.
Most of the guys that work in the plant, I think, don't understand that.
How about the best boss you ever had?
They had all good bosses.
Okay.
I didn't have any bad bosses. I didn't have any bad jobs either. I never had a job that I didn't think was necessary and was busy. And the busier it was, the better. Yeah. And well, bosses are different now. They're not all the same. Don't misunderstand me. I never had what I call a bad one, though. I think I ever had one I didn't get along with fine. And it treated me fine, so.
I'm glad you brought your notes along, Mr. Cook, because it's been very helpful.
Well, I would have liked to have more time to make more, but
Well, you want to come back? Our doors are
no,
always open.
I know. I'm having but no, your memory gets foggier as you get older, you know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Oh, take a minute with us on your staff meeting that the general manager had. The kinds of things which would generally have gone on in that.
Well, almost anything could go on, except, of course, you didn't expect to have to handle a staff head's little detail programs unless they affected everybody else, a lot of other people. But, you know, you'd review schedules, cost, quality, inventories, sales. All the staff heads were there, and certain key assistants were always there. We tried to have them once a week, unless there was some reason, you know, like I was gone for the week or something, we'd postpone them. Maybe wouldn't have one. But there's almost no subject that we didn't cover in some detail. You know, and whatever, to get a perspective on it. And you always had to watch, you know, car schedules, car sales, always had quality reports in on a regular basis. Every month we got an update, or often if needed, on that. And any staff head that had a subject that needed to go on or he thought could go on, you know, could call in the secretary and propose it, and we'd try to get it on if we thought it was that stature. But what it did, it helped a lot of the, you know, and the engineering department was there. They'd talk about some of their stuff when they need to, but it gave all the other staff heads exposure to what, you know, was going. Like the personnel director, for example, was a staff head. He reported to me. He'd sit there, he'd hear the guy talking about car schedules and sales and what the outlook was, and are we going to have to raise them, or are we going to have to maybe taper them a bit? So that, you know, he had that in his background. That was the purpose of a staff meeting, really, besides informing the general manager and helping him. Why, it helped all the rest. Like I told you, I sat on him for 20-some years, and when I got to be general manager, these subjects weren't strange to me at all. You know.
Basically, information dissemination, sort of.
Well,
decision making.
no, both.
Both.
information and decision if you needed. Yeah. Sometimes decision had to be, completed outside of there, but a lot of them, you do both. And usually didn't invite, non-Oldsmobile people. I don't hardly ever remember any of those coming in. Usually it was Oldsmobile people. If it was accounting, be down, always had the
Did you get
comptroller
into
there.
a lot of discussion on what I'll call the financial end of the business? Was that part fairly significant?
Oh, we do financial usually every report, and then there was things like inventories and, and occasionally on how we're doing profit-wise. Yeah, most of the staff heads knew where we were doing divisional profit-wise.
So divisional profit was a thing that was carried on pretty much through that continuum to decide on how you're doing financially. Yeah, we kind of like to make a little profit. That's probably a good idea.
We did well for some certain years.
Well, I suspect those years we
No, staff meetings were, I thought, a very important part of the thing you were talking about a while ago on coordinator. You were, I guess, coordinating things at Olds. Whether they did this at other divisions, I don't know, but at least we tried to do that as a coordinating thing. And
were those basically things that all general managers that you dealt with over the years did too?
Yeah.
That's not a
No.
thing for...
Way back from time, well, like I say, I started sitting there at a time when Wolfram hadn't been general manager only a couple of years. And same thing. Same thing.
How about in the manufacturing manager, you had that get together in Building 40 each week?
Kind of the same thing, only more to
One level
manufacturing.
down.
Well, it was more the manufacturing problems there.
Had that existed for years and years, so to speak, as a methodology also?
Oh gosh, far. I don't remember sitting in any of Dykstra's. I'll talk about that in a minute, but Downey always had them every Wednesday, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Wednesdays, 9 to 30, yeah. And Rollis had them, and then I had them. And, we could, again, the people that were key would bring up there, and then usually they'd open up, and anybody there that had something they wanted to talk about could pop it at the end of the meeting. And sometimes you get some surprises in that one. But that was good. If the guy had something on his mind, he got it off, or got it talked about. And, no, as far as I know, manufacturing did the same thing. Yeah. And I assume the other staffs had their, I never sat in the sales department staff meeting, but I did the manufacturing because that's where I came from.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we broke ground for Plant 5, the diesel plant? Stood out there that day with the big yellow bulldozer?
Yeah, I got one of those pictures somewhere. It's probably in there, that bunch, yeah. And who was...
Can you remember what you were thinking that day?
No, I don't know.
That was a long time ago.
Oh, gosh, no, I don't remember.
Just curious.
I just remember to get... see, what did we decide to build out there to start with?
We were going to make little V6s 800 a day.
V6 diesels, weren't we? I saw one of those yesterday. I saw a Sierra sitting there with a diesel. It had to be a V6. As far as I know, that little engine ran pretty good, but of course it got shut down before it got started.
Yeah, we never really did much, unfortunately.
Diesel fuel right now is, what, more than unleaded?
More than gas.
Yeah, oh yeah. And really, you pay a premium for it. It used to be 20% under. Always real economic. I had a diesel wagon when I retired. 82, I kept it 2-3 years. Ran it to Florida 2-3 times. Great. They ran, and I load them when I go to Florida, because I was renting a place down there from Ed Boat. And I'd load it real full. I couldn't even see out the back window. I had to use the side mirrors. And I was getting like 26.5 to a gallon on a big wagon, loaded. Running, 65 or whatever, quote, at least. And so it was, great on mileage. But it finally got enough miles on it, and diesel started to get a little harder to get and raising the price, so I just went back to a gasoline one. But fuel was scheduled to hit $3 a gallon when we did that, and it never got close to it.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, never got close. Now they're talking about it. Well, I don't think they think it's going to go up this time that high either. They get this thing settled over in the Gulf.
Well, let's see. What else should we cover, Helen? How are we doing here? How's
What do we
getting
got?
out of here?
I got to get out of here in about 5 minutes or so. Well, I don't know, is there anything else out
I
there
think we've
at,
probably covered pretty much of all of them. So,
okay.
Do you remember any comical or interesting little
antidotes.
tidbits that happened while you were general manager?
Oh, no, not comic things. You were talking one here a while ago, I'm rambling a little, about what made the gang at Olds kind of feel together, family-wise. And I think some of the things, personnel probably keys them, but, the picnic, the Christmas party, things like that, always were very good. And I remember going to Christmas parties when Skinner was still here.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Wolfram continued them, and they were great. And some of them were more elaborate than others, and some of them down. I think it depended a little how business was. And as you recall, in '74, when we hit the gas crunch, we canceled the thing. And I had to, I just didn't want to spend that much money when we were not making any. But when we got back and going, we put her back in bigger than ever. And, I think those things did a lot of good. So, but I know I used to look forward to going. God, we'd go to the Christmas party, and they'd have another party of their own, most of them, or some of them, or the picnics with the kids. When my kids were little, they loved those picnics, and so forth. So I think those things all did some good, too.
Those things all kind of existed prior to you actually coming, didn't they, Bob?
Oh, they were.
They were there when you were a student.
Oh, sure. When I was, that's why I say, over the years I enjoyed them because I'd gone to so many of them with my own kids.
Well, then the Quarter Century Club had gotten so large, there was no physical facility in the city that would hold that many members, that many people.
Yeah, I made it, went to one or two of their get-togethers, and that kind of disbanded.
Yeah, it went away.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you can have too many of those activities too, maybe, I don't know. But I never got involved only a couple times in the Quarter Century Club. That would be 1965. By that time it was tapering away.
Well, there's one other area, you may not want to talk about it, but just what I'll call the EEO approaches and the changes, any of that you would care to share with us over those years? I think of us as having good employee relations in all the years, and I think of us as having had a pretty good cross-section of the people working at the shop. But as years wore on, the government got to helping us with requirements. Is that?
I don't ever remember it being any particular problem.
Okay.
I just thought everybody handled it pretty good. Kind of matter of factly, I didn't think. Never knew it was any particular.
Well, I don't think it was
Never
either,
problem.
but I was from afar, so to speak.
Yeah, no. I guess nothing stands out in my mind on it.
All right.
Yep.
Well, great. Thanks,
Been
Bob.
good. Yep.
Appreciate it again.
Yep.
Wonderful.